to actually make that sound. You want to do that warping wind down kind of feel, you can force it to do that. But in most cases where you don't want it to do that, because if you did every time you were stretching, manipulating, you would notice a noticeable pitch change every time you manipulated something. Now here's the key. So these are the benefits. I'll tell you one big all-encompassing key. So the benefits of elastic audio, stretch compress audio, we can time align audio, we can change pitch, but it's user-defined or user-manipulated. And the biggest benefit we get out of it is natural transitions. Well, here's one other key element. Elastic audio, if you are going to stretch, you must understand that stretched waveforms suffer from one problem. They require more samples to effectively sound natural. The problem with it is if you were to take, okay, so let's you guys, I know you probably never use this, but when you look on the timeline, there's something called samples you see on the timeline, and you can even see it up in the counter up at top. But if you were to open up where at the top across and you actually said samples, let's look at samples. Well, you can see the digits pop up for samples. Problem is that if you were to stretch this piece of audio right here, if I were to stretch this piece of audio using elastic audio, time compression expansion, or any other manipulation form, when I stretch this, because it was recorded at 44.1K, right? If I stretch it, it adjusts how many samples just took place. Because if I highlighted 1 second of audio and it was captured at 44.1, that means it's 44,100 samples in 1 second. As soon as I stretch it to 2 seconds long, it just cut that sample rate in half. You notice that's a problem. Why is that a problem?
You can't go any lower than that.
Essentially, you're not supposed to. So one key element you have to remember, that to stretch effectively for waveforms, you're going to want to start at a higher sample rate. You guys probably wondered why there's a lot of DJ equipment, like, well, I should just say flat-out DJ equipment. We're not talking turntables. A lot of times we're talking DJ equipment that allows them to warp their audio, a lot of the peripherals that they design for DJ equipment. A lot of times people are looking at it going, why do they need to go to 96K? Or why is 192K even valuable for a DJ? Most of the time it's because when they start stretching and manipulating their beats, if they started at 44.1, they'd have a resolution problem as they make changes to the audio. So a lot of times they do need 96 or 88.2 or 192. They need a high resolution format. You see what I'm saying? Because of the stretching capabilities. All right, let's get into some basics here, right? Let's look into the main functions of elastic audio. I'm going to follow on screen and I'm going to write it on the board. But you do need to remember this because it's going to be super crucial for elastic audio purposes. Okay, so elastic audio uses something called elastic audio plugins. You guys should know this by now, right? What are they? Elastic audio plugins, what are they? You guys remember these? All right, there are a few essential elastic audio plugins. Now, here's the key, okay? Now, you guys, in the modern age, how many times when you're running Pro Tools do you think in binary code? Never, right? All right, not an important, valuable thing for you. In the same regard, you're not going to think in terms of the algorithms that are designed for manipulating audio. But what these plugins are, essentially, is these are designed mathematical relationships for analyzing the actual waveforms that are coming through for us to tear apart with elastic audio. So these plugins are how elastic audio analyzes and breaks down timing mechanisms on each clip. Which means the plugin, if you pick the wrong plugin, it'll analyze the wrong elements, and timing-wise, it will inappropriately map your elastic audio. So can you screw up elastic audio? Absolutely, for that main reason. For that main reason alone. Step one to doing anything in elastic audio, hopefully you knew this by now. I'll just put this up here on this. You guys all got the benefits, right? Step one, elastic audio. Switch from what to what?
Sample rate?
Yep, so we're switching, well, not sample rate. We're switching from samples to ticks. You guys remember this?
Yep.
What's the value of that? Anybody know? All my Pro Tools geniuses we have over here? All right, first of all, let me show you. So this is your little transition here from time-based selector. It's in samples. I'm going to switch it from samples to ticks. So what I'd actually like for you to do, let's do this on the drums. Let's start this process from the top. Let's go all the way back to the drum tracks. Let's keep them grouped. You guys, those of you who you weren't here on Wednesday, so you probably didn't get a chance to mess with this project at all. First thing I want you to do is there's a bunch of drum tracks. Can you go ahead and select them all and group them into one group? Just call it drums. Isabel, you were here Wednesday. You did complete the grouping of the drums, right?
Yeah.
All right, so they're already grouped. All right, make sure that for those of you who were here Monday, I had you ungroup and regroup and do a bunch of stuff. Make sure your drum group is live and your group is active in the group list on the bottom left. So make sure all your drums are in that group. And for those of you who were here Monday, let's revert back. I had you duplicate the playlist, so you had the original version underneath, and then you had the Beat Detective version. Can you go back a level and make sure you're back at the original drums? I think you're at the original drums now. Oh yeah, you were back there. Yeah. So just make sure you're at the original drums before we did the Beat Detective process, because obviously we don't want to do both. So we're just going to simply jump back. Right, it's kind of where we started before. All right, so here I am on my drums. So I'm going to go ahead and do this on the drums, but this has to be done to the group. So the whole group is going to go from samples to ticks. What you should notice is, oh, hold on. Hopefully this isn't about to crash. All right, there we go. It made it. What you should notice is if you did that to the group, the whole group just switched from samples to ticks. Make sure you, so transition that whole group from samples to ticks. Let me know when you guys are all there. Yeah, you're good. So far, you guys have done this, right? At least you processed this before, right? Something like this.
All of them?
Yeah, just the drums. Make sure your drum group is live. Just activate your drum group. Yeah, and then just, yeah, make sure. If you just do it to one, you'll do it to all. Make sure you're also in medium view, because this gives you the most expanded version of the tools all right there on the left without having to jump in and right-click through menus. Activate your drum group, bottom left. Yeah. Now it's inactive. There you go. Now it's active. Go ahead and switch the first one to switch back. Okay, tick-based time. What's the difference between tick-based? I'll run through this. This is fast. What's tick-based versus sample rate?
Tick.
Yes. Huge. Right? So, okay, kind of back to what I was saying. They're kind of heady. It's a little heady. Heady meaning like it's a little mentally challenging. Okay? So you guys ready for a mental challenge? Here we go. Sample rate states, right? So follow me this. Sample rate states that a sample rate must capture this many samples per what? Samples per? Seconds. Yeah. Sample per second. So if I just do a real easy breakdown. Let's say we record something at 44.1K, and I only have 1 second worth. Okay? Follow me on that so far? How many samples did I just capture? 1 second's worth. At 44.1, how many samples are there?
40.
Yeah. Yeah. So 44,100, right? 44.1. Pretty simple, right? Here's the catch. The catch is, what was my BPM in that 1 second? Technically, it's default. Well, it could have been, and technically it's user defined. So if the BPM of the song in that 1 second is at BPM equals 80, nice and slow, that means that technically what I had inside of 44.1K samples in that 1 second, I may have only had 1 quarter note division happen. Got it so far? Got me so far? Okay. If instead that was at twice the speed, 100 BPM equals 160, I may have had 2 quarter notes happen in that 1 second. The big difference is, if I was to adjust the sample itself to be mapped to the grid in either instance after it was recorded. So let's say I recorded it at BPM equals 80. My sample rate was what? 44.1. It is 1 second long. If I change my BPM to 160 and I want my sample to adjust to tempo like we did when we were using the browser, it would have to shrink to half its size, but in resolution form, it would mean that per every second, instead of being 44.1, it just became 1.
Double?
Yeah, double, 88.2. Follow me, right? Yeah, makes sense. Because we just shrank it, because of it, the sample rate, of course, expanded. Okay, so there's that. On the other end of that whole thing, sample rate is fixed to what? Sample rate is assigned to fixed to samples per second. So sample rate is time-based. And time-based is not tempo-based. You understand the difference, right? If I said, hey, this song is 30 seconds long, it doesn't give you any reference to what tempo would be, right?
No.
Yeah, right, exactly. But if I said, hey, the tempo is BPM equals 80, you might go, all right, well, how many seconds long is the song? In the opposite form, it doesn't reference the other way either. The brilliance of it, though, is if you want to map anything timing-wise to the grid at all, sub beats, major beats, if you just want bars, do a quarter note, tape them, 16th, 32nd, 64ths, you can do the whole gamut, 128. You can do the whole gamut, but you can't do it in samples. Why? Because sample is not assigned to a beat-based. It's time. Get it? So samples equal time, ticks equal, just like you said, beats. Now here's the catch. Ticks have a fixed amount of ticks, and that's someone just said, hey, I'm going to make these hash lines work out as a breakdown of the resolution of beats and how many ticks belong in a beat. You should have learned this in a Virtuals 101 book. Per every quarter note, there are 980 ticks. You guys remember that number?
Yeah.
No? 980 ticks for one quarter note, which means one quarter note to the next, there's 980 essentially like division lines that they gave it. They gave it a subset of 980 ticks to hash it out, which means that from a time perspective, if I were to look at this, let's say I look at this little light grid here, and this is my clip, okay? And for each one of these little rod connection points, this is a tick, 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 right? And this is a full clip. If I said, all right, that was each tick was in my quarter note, and I want to double the speed of the song now, what it's going to do is it's going to take those tick points that are assigned to the clip, and all it's going to do is say, oh, okay, well, we want to go twice the speed. All we have to do with the tick points is bring them in to half the resolution. So all it's doing is it's taking tick markers of the clip, and it's assigning them to locations, and it's just squeezing them and expanding them based upon the mapping of the tempo. It's really simple. It's a brilliant idea that when they came out with it, everybody was like, oh, it's so cool. Not realizing in reality it's very fundamental. All they did was take MIDI-based components, which is tick, and they applied it to audio so that it always has a hash marker, and it gets assigned to it. So that's how it's being used. Brilliant part about that, though, is that when they did that, they enhanced the algorithm so that they weren't just transient-based, meaning they're not just hard clips that come in and go out. Instead, they also could analyze for what we call polyphony. What's polyphony? Polyphony means polyphony.
More than one
Yeah, more than one what?
sound?
Yes. Yeah, essentially more than one note playing at the same time. Is my voice polyphonic?
No.
No. My voice is what? Opposite of polyphonic? Monophonic, right? So some of the plugins we're going to see for Elastic Audio are designed for monophonic instruments, meaning their algorithm is only going to expect one pitch at a time, right? So then there are others that are going to be for polyphonic instruments. Give me a polyphonic instrument. What would it be? Whole polyphonic instrument.
Guitar?
Yeah, not a wind instrument. Yeah, violin could be, yeah, absolutely. Because they can play one string or they can play multiples. What else?
Guitar?
Guitar,
Piano?
piano, right? Those are all polyphonic instruments. Most of the categories that you can see, like a lot of times I talk to students about this when we talk about musicality, monophonic instruments are very noticeable because in most cases, a monophonic instrument, right, in reality, typically only has one voice engine. And that's kind of the thing they forget about. They always think about the output finalization, but typically a monophonic instrument only has one voice engine. And you have to look at what's the voice engine. Because if I was looking at playing a single stringed instrument, like the difference between playing a guitar, how many strings? 6. And you guys ever seen those in Hawaii? They play these like upright basses and it's one string on a big stick and it goes into a bucket. And that's their bass. It has that sound when you hear the ukulele. You ever seen that? All right, guess what? That's monophonic. Why? It's because it's got one string, so it's one engine. You know what I'm saying? So there's only one mechanism that can even fire a note. Whereas most wind instruments are singular monophonic, but guess who's not? There's one in particular that's kind of makes an eerie, annoying sound. It's definitely not monophonic. Comes from,
Saxophone?
huh? Comes from overseas somewhere. They wear kilts when they play this. What is it?
Bagpipe?
Yeah, the bagpipes. And the bagpipes it's designed as an instrument that they fill with air, but on the output it has multiple engines of creating notes. Oh, guess who else is monophonic? That just in the same vein, accordion, right? Or polyphonic. Sorry, polyphonic is a polyphony. All these notes at one time. But the fun thing about the engine, what's the engine? So when you're looking at your track, you're going to pick a plugin that gets applied to what the track is doing. If the track is monophonic, it must use a monophonic algorithm to be analyzed. If your track is polyphonic, it must use a polyphonic track to be analyzed. So your options for the plugins are monophonic, polyphonic. The other one for drums we use and things like drums is called rhythmic. And then we have the high-res format, known as X-Form, and the Verispeed. So, and I'll need to talk about these last two. So Verispeed, and X-Form. Now you probably don't need a definition for monophonic, right? You're going to apply a monophonic to things like bass, vocals, things like that. You're going to apply a polyphonic to things like stringed instruments, piano, anything that makes multiple notes at a time. Rhythmic's going to go to what? Yeah, drums. Verispeed is very specific. So Verispeed, this one manipulates pitch at the same time. So Verispeed manipulates pitch because otherwise these guys do not modify pitch at all when they shrink or they expand or compress. X-Form essentially is a high-res real-time format. High-res real-time, which means when you do it, every time you have to wait for the processing to process in X-Form. X-Form is really good for finalizing things that are just not working in any other form. So it's like, hey, for some reason I hear the quality of sound diminishes as I'm using Elastic Audio. If I utilize X-Form, I can offset that a lot of times, but it's in real time, which is why it says render only, meaning it has to render every time you process it, which takes forever a lot of times from a musical standpoint. Verispeed again. Verispeed's very useful if you want to do some warping that goes kind of feel. You want things to slow down and have that effect. Verispeed, you got it. Otherwise, you're going to usually pick one of the first three. Which one are we going to use on drums?
Rhythmic.
Yeah, so let's go for it. So as soon as you hit rhythmic, it's immediately going to analyze what's going on here. Now, here's a catch that I'm not sure if you guys are even, or this is a little helpful tip. I'm not sure if you guys are even using anything like this. Please go to your window while you're doing this. So did you switch it to rhythmic already?
Yeah.
No.
Oh, I'm sorry. Here, down here at the bottom. Look up on screen real quick. William, so this is it. So this is where you change it from samples to ticks.
Okay.
And as soon as you change it to ticks, you'll see this little, it looks like a landmine or something, some sort of flag or something going on right here.
Okay, see.
Click there. That's going to give you your drop down. You're going to change. That's where you choose your Elastic Audio plugin is right there. Switch to rhythmic real quick. Here's the other thing I want you to do though. Once you do that, make sure you did it do for all. They should all be grayed out, right? Kind of
Yes.
while they're processing. Go to Window at the top. Go to Window. Go to Task Manager. You may never use Task Manager, but you're going to use it when you really start doing professional audio. Go and hit Task Manager. You should see.
Yeah, it started running, analyzing.
Yep, it should show that there's stuff being worked on in the background. The Task Manager, when mine doesn't show anything, because I just did mine, it's like, here, actually, let me kick it back. I'll see if it'll show it. I think because I did it, it might. Well, actually, I'll change mine to something other than rhythmic and see if it shows. There it goes. See it? If you didn't see yours doing yours on screen, if you missed it, what it should look like is it should be cycling through, analyzing the audio. The Task Manager is very beneficial for you to know if anything's being processed in the background. There's only one key given that shows on screen that anything is even being processed in the background that you're not aware of. On screen at the top, you see on the top of my screen.
So once it goes into rhythmic, what is it supposed to look like?
I'll show you. Actually, it shouldn't change.
Oh.
It won't change. You have to go to a specific view to see it change, and I'll show you where that's at. See that little red icon at the top of my screen here? What this means is that files are being worked on in the background. All right, so it's important to know if you ever see this go red, that essentially means things are being processed in the background. If you ever see this go red, that means files are missing or offline. So they're kind of just small indicators to show that, hey, we're either good or we're not. Now that you've done that, you can go ahead and close your task manager for now. We're going to open it up again in a second so we can see what's going on with it. Once you've done that, in your track view selector, where's your track view selector? Track view selector. Which one is it? Yeah, it says waveform. So the track view selector on the left column, on your left column there, where it says waveform. Yeah. Yeah, there you go. That's your track view selector. Switch it, please, to warp. Warp. And you should see. So your question, Isabel, we're going to go to the track view selector. We're going to change it to warp. This is going to start to show us what is eligible to change. Now, just because we switched into the Rhythmic plugin doesn't mean anything's even happened yet. So technically, all we're going to see here are, if you zoom in, and you can only see them if you zoom in, you should see little gray markers. All these are warp markers. That means they're being assigned to specific elements inside of time. But the catch is they haven't processed anything. So if you were to push play right now, the drums haven't changed at all. The only thing that's changed is the view that we're seeing is we're now seeing the analysis of what we can do with the elastic audio. You guys have all done this, right? Yeah? You've done this before, right? No? Okay. Well, in this
class is back.
Yeah, a couple classes probably. Make sure if you haven't done this, try to keep some notes on this. The biggest problem with this is that most people will remember the big elements about it, and they'll forget a lot of the little things about it, and then when they go to do it, it gets very frustrating, and then before you know it, it takes more time than it's worth. You know what I mean? Because if I'm going in there going, oh, dude, look, I can see the grid. See the grid right here? Oh, man, what happened here? You see this? I really hope that's either what we call a prep beat, right? Or it's otherwise it's rhythmically off. So, if I want to put this back on, there's a couple ways we can do it. So this is kind of interesting how we set this up. Once we've done step one, change to ticks. Step two, choose a plugin, right? So choose the Elastic Audio plugin. We chose Rhythmic, right? Not too difficult. At this point in time, we have two choices. We can either, in step three, manually move, or I'll say manually warp the audio. Sorry, bud. We can either manually warp, or we can use, at this point in time, use quantization. Now, I quantize stuff a lot when I'm just trying to make it quick and easy. Quantization doesn't always work effectively, which sometimes requires you to go manual with it. But it also, the catch is it of such importance that it has to be meticulously gone over? Or is it one of those things that with background that's really not doing a lot? If it's a tambourine, I'm not going to spend an hour working out tambourine parts. What I'm going to do instead is I'm going to map it out and hope that it lands, and I'll just cycle through it, make sure it's close, and if anywhere that's not, I'll probably replace it with a copy paste. Not a big deal, right? It shouldn't be something you spend a lot of time on. But when it's a lead vocal, you don't want to go in and quantize a lead vocal. What you want to do with the lead vocal is you want to only make the adjustments you absolutely have to make, right? And you want to very meticulously go through those adjustments piece by piece. Because otherwise you get screwed with, you'll have more of it be wrong than right. And that's really frustrating. So it's kind of one of those things you're trying to, figure out what manipulation technique you'll use. Manually warping works very easily if you're just going, hey, look, I have one hit that needs to be changed. I have one phrase that needs to be changed. I had a couple of clients that bring in their stuff, and it's like, dude, there was a rule for tracking I gave you guys on Monday that I talked about. I talked about it, I think, on Wednesday. What was my rule for tracking at the very end of a song? What do you do?
Long fade?
Yeah, well, that's what you do with the edit. What do you do when you're tracking?
Always make the edit.
Yeah, well, but there was another thing, though. When you're in there, you're recording, and they're back there playing, what was I saying? Tell them to do.
Oh, to keep playing all the way till the end of the...
Yeah, so essentially they're going to let it ring out, all right? I've had a couple clients come in, and their stuff literally went, at the end of the song, went, bah. And I'm like, dude, who cut this clip? and they're like, oh man, yeah, someone must have done that. Oh, we hit stop too soon. And where are the original files? Can we get to them? No, we can't do that. Oh, that really sucks. So what's our fix? We're going to go in and we're going to warp the final note so it's nice and long, right? Just that final note so the transition's out correctly. I had a vocalist that I was working with, and I wrote the song, and she just, for the life of me, she could not sing the part correctly. And I'm like, okay, you know what? Like, either you're going to get this, or I'm going to go in and get it. And essentially what I had to do is go in and rhythmically map it out so it lined up. That's all doable. It's brilliantly doable. But there's a couple of catches with how to do it. So make sure you have the steps down, because then this isn't even the hard part. Understanding the steps isn't the hard part. The manipulation of the tools inside of the steps is the very difficult part. And once you kind of ace those, life is super, super easy. Okay, so here's one of the biggest catches with Elastic Audio. In the same way, I said one of the rules for edits, I know you guys hadn't necessarily copied the notes down from your classmates yet, but one of the major rules for edits is simultaneously recorded tracks do what?
Edit them together?
Yes, so we edit them together. So simultaneously recorded tracks must be edited together. Why? Because Quandre, I think we were talking about this last week, right? Or on Monday. Why would we simultaneously record tracks have to be edited together because of what? If they were moved outside of each other, what happens?
They'll be separate.
Yeah. Yeah, well, why? A big relationship.
Because they're not grouped, right?
No, well, that was why they're off. But yes, because the timing is different, which causes one big problem called out of phase. Out of phase. Out of phase immediately happens as soon as you just even minutely move a track off of its original time base when they're recorded simultaneously. When they're recorded simultaneously, why would phase be a problem at all? Because multiple mics that are open are receiving bleed from other instruments. It could be as simple as you took an acoustic guitar, you put 2 mics on it. You guys ever done that? Took an acoustic guitar, put 2 mics on it. Take a piano, put 2 mics on it. If you edit those 2 mics separate from one another, you're going to have a phasing and timing problem massively. Even if they were slightly off. I saw, just as the craziest thing I saw one time, I was in a studio, and we were processing live piano stereo tracks. We were processing it to 2 pieces of outboard gear. One of them happened to have, in its analog gear, happened to have a slight amount of latency when it returned back to the console. And when you put it in, all of a sudden it got weird. It was like, what is going on with the sound? The sound just went from really cool to like, whoa. And what it turned out to be is there was a faulty input amp on the device. So the device itself was broken. And you had to switch to a different device, but you immediately could hear it because when you flipped it in and out of phase, it was in phase before it left, and when it came back, it was out of phase. Kind of interesting thing, but it does happen. So it's very important to make sure when you're thinking about multiple tracks, you got to keep them in phase. So looking at this, jumping into the Elastic Audio setup here, we're going to do this fairly quickly, but I'll show you. Here's the manual way. I'm going to show it to you. I'm going to walk you through it. We're going to do the manual way, and then we'll do the easy way, because the easy way is easy. Manual way is going to take a little more work. So the manual way we're going to do this all revolves around the grabber tool. The grabber tool. So the grabber tool just became your best friend. I'm going to write a couple of cheating elements here so you know what they are. The grabber tool. When you're using the grabber tool to manually warp, I'll put it up on this right side so you have it. So grabber tool. Grabber tool. If you just grab, it essentially moves warp markers. If you option grab, it deletes them. If you control grab, it adds them. And then one more element. I think the hotkey for this one is, so let's see. shift plus grab, equals well, they call it telescope. They call it telescope warping, but it becomes confusing. I think the big thing is a shift grab really creates 3 markers, and it creates two established boundary markers. And I think that's the big thing that we have to look at too. So you guys should have learned the different types of warp style. There's what we call telescope warping. Telescope warping looks like this. You take a clip, and just like a telescope, the whole thing goes out, or the whole thing comes in. Just like this, telescope warping, right? The other kind of warping you have, essentially, is you have, I'm trying to remember the technical term for there's boundary warping, which are going to use the most. I think the book should outline, there's one more. One more.
What is it, V8?
Say it again? Oh, yeah, create, sorry. Accordion warping is the other one. And range warp is the one that we'll use the most. Accordion warping means that when you warp it, it warps. So this is telescope warping warps from one end to the other. Because one end has to be fixed. Telescoping, one end is fixed, the other end extends. Right? So makes sense. Accordion warping means that you warp from the center, and it warps from the center boundaries outward, which means it either expands out from the center or it shrinks into the center. You're not really going to use that a whole lot, because that one's, to me, honestly, as a musician, I find very, nil use for it. Range warp is the biggest by far. You can use telescope warping, you'll use sometimes. Range warp usually means you drop 2 markers on the outer boundaries, and the only thing you manipulate is just one particular waveform here and there in the middle of the boundaries. I'm going to walk you through that. This one, when you do the shift grab, it comes out, it says telescope warp, but really what it's doing is it's creating a range warp opportunity for you. So I'll walk you through it so you'll see exactly what takes place. The other catch to warping. One problem with warping is if your clips are separated into separate clips, you have to be aware that if you're at the front end or the back end of a clip and you try to make a warp maneuver on the front end or the back end of a clip, automatically, unless you use the shift option there, the shift grab to create a range, it automatically wants to telescope from one end to the other. Which means if you were at the beginning of a clip, you grab the first marker you see and you go left or right, essentially it's going to expand the whole thing from the end further left or right, and if you did it at the other side, further left or right at the end. And it's kind of one of those things, if you did it in the middle, it wouldn't expect you to do that, because that's not how it's designed to work. But essentially, the safest way to do your manipulations is usually to utilize the shift command. So let's check this out real quick in a realistic format. Watch on screen, and then I'm going to have you do this, okay? First of all, we were talking a bit about where the power of the waveform should lie. So if I were to zoom in and look at my waveform here, according to the grid, according to what they state in the grid, this is kind of where it wants to put, from a marker standpoint, it wants to put all of my drum markers right here at the very, very front. If I want to change that, I need to go in and actually grab the marker itself. And sometimes what you'll notice is it won't let you do it if you immediately grab it. So what I'll do oftentimes is I'll want to go in and delete it. Although, let me see something real quick. Oh, yeah. And if in the warp view, this is where all of your work takes place, in the warp view. But if you go to analysis view, you'll see this is where they put their analysis markers. So if you kick back to the analysis view, if you didn't like where a marker was placed, you could jump in and make a move with it and reposition it. The other thing you could do, just like we were talking about, is you could delete it if you hold Option, or you could add it if you hold Control. Okay? But just notice that this functionality differs from what you do when you go to warp mode, or the track view into warp. Oh, I'm sorry, DeQuandre, I think you were gone when we switched. We switched to the rhythmic plugin for drums. So let me real quick make sure you're with us here. So right here, you're switching your drums. You already did samples to ticks, right? And then you're right here next to it, you're going to make the Elastic Audio plugin say rhythmic. And then once you're done with that, you're going to go to warp in the track view selector. So here's the track view selector where it says waveform. Please go to warp. That way you can see all the warp markers that are put up. Okay, so here's the key. What you see on screen right now, these technically are analysis markers. Okay, see those little gray hash lines? Technically, these are only analysis markers, which is why the only manipulation you can do to them is if you go to the analysis track view. And it's based upon, the analysis markers are just based upon where they're trying to make your changes inside of these tracks themselves. When you're in warp, this is what the warp marker looks like. I'll show it to you, okay? I'm holding control, and I'm clicking on these analysis lines. So notice you can choose to put a warp marker on the analysis line. If you're in slip mode, you can choose to put it anywhere else. If you're in grid mode, you have to put your markers on the grid itself. So same way you do when you edits. But see all these in the blue down at the bottom here? Now it's doing it to the whole group. See these little lines with the blue line at the bottom? That's a warp marker. If you're looking at just this gray thing, it's not a warp marker, it's just an analysis marker. It won't do anything at any given time until you actually add the warp marker. So if I want to add the warp marker, I'm going to undo what I just did. And again, like I said, control is to add. So notice it gets a plus sign. Let me zoom in a little more. Control, add, right? If I hold Option, it's delete. So let me add one, and then I'll hold Option. See how it goes to delete? The minus button meaning delete. This is what I put up on the board. Yeah, you remember this? Okay, and then Shift. So this is what Shift does. Let me zoom out a little bit. So when you hold Shift, this is what happens. You'll see, right now I see there's a, let's say this is the analysis marker that I want to create a warp marker with, this one right here. If I hold Shift, what it's going to do is it's going to drop one right here, and then it's going to immediately drop two outer boundary markers to the two closest ones out to the left and to the right. See that? So these ones right here just were added. Down below, you can see to a certain degree that there's different analysis markers being applied to this group, but you can see how it did it overall. Now, in this instance, this is what I would do, all right, to make this nice and easy. What I really want, let's say I want to keep this kick where it's at. I want to keep this kick where it's at, but at the middle one right here, I want to move. What I'm really going to do is I'm going to get rid of these guys that are going to be in the in-between. I want to make sure everybody gets this marker, right, where that kick falls. Everybody on the outer boundary gets this marker. Let me delete that one and start again. There we go. And then I don't want this one left in here. See this one in the middle? It's going to inhibit my ability to move stuff. Now, I'm going to show you what's called a range warp. This is the most common one that you're going to use. And how it is defined is in a range warp, you have to establish a front-end boundary and a back-end boundary. So this is the beginning of the range, here's the end of the range, which means now if I grab this here, anything I left one out. Anything I do to this range right here is going to stay with a fixed beginning. See how the beginning's fixed? And a fixed end. So if I was like, hey, I really need this to land over here. Right? You see how that works? And essentially what it should do is it should sound correct. Now, let me do another thing actually so that this is worth listening to. I'm just actually going to put boundary markers out on the outside here. I'm going to get rid of, oh no, I won't. Actually, let me do this. Let me solo the drums. And let me highlight this section here. All right, so let me say I'm going to start by mapping these to the grid. So I can manually do it. So notice, oh, whoops, sorry, I have the range highlighted, so it's going to, I can manually do this. Or I can just go to grid and activate the grid, and if I move this to the right, it's just going to snap. So notice these are all snapping. See how these all snap to grid? This one has a boundary marker in the way, I think, somewhere.
Can
Oh,
you
there.
just quantize it?
Yes. But as I was talking about before, there's two ways to warp. One way is manual, and the other way is quantize. The reason you would do a manual versus a quantize is you may only find that you only need one beat manipulated. Now, I'm doing rhythmic stuff because the rhythmic stuff's easy. But as soon as we were to go into a vocal, you can't quantize a vocal very effectively. You're going to have to get comfortable with manually doing it. So I'm just walking you through the manual operation. Yeah, the quantize process, like I said, the quantize process is a quick and easy process to do. But in reality, a lot of times, this is what I find, even with the drummer. A drummer comes in and does something, I'm like, dang, I like that, but I prefer this rhythm. So what am I going to do? I'm probably going to go in and manually map it out. And that'll be different than quantizing, because quantizing only shifts it to the nearest grid. But sometimes the nearest grid is not the correct grid, right? Sometimes the correct grid isn't the nearest grid, and they were just that far off, or you're really doing a lot of manipulating. In this one, I have tom, so you're hearing this phrase. I'll play it again for you. You hear that? So this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to back this off. So this one's on the grid. So all these guys are on the grid. I'm going to go to my toms. Here's tom 1. Here's tom 2. Tom 2 fires off first. Hear it? And then it goes boop, right? Notice if I were to activate the grid in 8th note, you would see that this beat is a little off, so it needs to go a little further. But what if I didn't like it in that rhythm? What I could do is if I further the grid resolution to the 16th, kind of seeing what's going on here? Now, when I really get into these toms, there's some spots here. Let's see. Let's go find one. Oh, okay, there's a big one. Now, to me, this sounds kind of like falling down the stairs. You hear it, right? It's kind of like flamming instead of landing accurately on the grid. So, you know what I'm going to do is just go into the grid, kind of map it out. Let's set it right, but then I also want to look and see, is this the best fill for this section? I don't know just yet. Let me kind of look at it, and we'll see if this is really what I want this section to sound like. So I'm just going to put a grid down at the beginning. Problem is okay, so the big catch with this, if you do not pin the boundaries, like let's say I didn't pin the outside boundaries like I just did. I put a boundary here and a boundary over off to the left. If I don't pin the boundaries and I just grab something, this is what happens. Yeah, it moves the whole line. You see that? So I got to go in and pin these boundaries. The boundaries have to be locked. And then from there, what I can do is I can just jump in and start, mapping these. All right, you're going to go here. Oops, sorry. Let me redo that. Notice this. This is another thing, too. So, and this is part of why, Isabel, I don't know if you were in here when I was talking about this. Quantizing works for things that, like I said, are not super important, but when they're of the utmost importance, it's very important for you to make sure that the analysis is operating correctly, which may mean that even when you quantize, you have to go back and edit it. Do you see where the marker is for this kick? It's off. If I map this kick according to where that marker's positioned, it's going to be pretty far behind the beat. Now, the reason it does that in the first place is because it sees something else inside of the group that hits early. And a lot of times, like, drummers will hit the drum at the same time they're hitting something else. And if one of those is off, you as the engineer have to determine which one is the priority. For me, it's always kick and snare. So if they were hitting a cymbal at the same time that they hit the kick, but one of them was early and one of them was late, the kick is the one that always has to be mapped to the right timing. Even if the cymbal sounds a little early, because the kick's going to have the dominant power, it's going to fulfill the sub. Otherwise, it's going to sound late, which is very noticeable. So this is an inappropriate marker. So I'm going to go in, just hit Control. Let me drop the marker where it should go, and then let's move our friend. Right? You see how this works out? Fairly simple. But it's that fill that I want to hear. So let's go ahead and map this out because I can already see there's a bunch of stuff going on that's not looking good. So probably because of the speed, I'm going to go to 16th note and try to see who's off, and let's see who needs to be locked. And again, this goes down in priority to, now notice, there are different marker positions on each different track, and the priority goes to who the hit is. So notice, this has a marker here, and this has a marker here, but the snare's got the hit. You can see it. So I'm not going to want to move this guy to grid. I'm going to want to move the snare hit to grid. You see this? Why? Because the snare hit is the priority. I wouldn't want to position that based upon something going on in some other thing that's not being hit. So notice if I go to Tom 1 and Tom 2, I can see here's Tom 1. This is Tom 1 in the purple. Let me slide down. Tom 2 is in the green. Is Tom 2 active? Here's Tom 1, here's Tom 2. Is Tom 2 being hit?
No.
So Tom 1 is my priority. So I'm not going to use this marker. I'm going to use this one. If you kind of follow me here now, right? This one I'm going to use. Oh, wow. What a big difference. Did you see that? This is where that next hit should be. Now all of a sudden you see Tom 2. Here's Tom 2's entrance. Towards the end of the fill. Here's Tom 2 again. Oh, I'm sorry. Back that up a sec. Here's Tom 1 in this one. Part of the reason is he gets a little ahead, so he gets a little behind to try to make up for it. And it all happens right here with the snare roll, which going back to how we read waveforms. So let's look at the snare. How we read the waveform in the blue or bluish purple here. He's doing a roll, and it's going bop, up. So you hear the swell go bop, up. This guy is kind of off. We had to make a decision in this. The kick and the snare are not in time. A lot of times when it's between the kick and the snare, you have to choose the kick because the kick's the only guy in the sub other than the bass. The snare has a lot of other individuals he's contending with in the midsection, so he's not going to be as noticeable, but if that kicks off, it's going to be very clear. So a lot of times if it's looking like this, you're like, you know what, I don't know which one to pick. Sometimes you want to go in and split the difference. So see the kick marker's way over here to the left, snare marker's way over here to the right. I'm just going to pick the best of both worlds and hope that it helps my transition here. Now I'm going to go ahead and add a marker here and see if we can... So let me get rid of this. It sounds to me as though this guy's happening here. So let me see if I can move it back. Okay, so what do you see here in the kick? I said he sped up, and then all of a sudden he slowed down to compensate. What do you see with this kick over here? Yeah, that guy's way off. And the analysis marker is way off. We got to bring this back in. Starting to hear some definition in there all of a sudden. Right? Where before it was kind of jumbly. You guys heard how it was, like I said, it was kind of like falling down the stairs. Typical maneuver for a drummer. You know, they just, a lot of times they'll get into a fill and they'll go, oh crap, I started it too fast. Let me compensate, slow it down on the back end, and then it sounds kind of sloppy. Even this one, I think we could maybe slide this off to the left a little. I think the drag's a little too far. A lot of times what it is it's the, it's how the roll goes off the head. There we go. Yeah, do you hear the difference? And furthermore, what I'm hearing is it's the first drag that makes it sound slow. And this one I think could even go over some more. If we brought it back over, bring the grid over, pull it back. And now all of a sudden we have a real tight fill. Now we could make manipulations to how this gets applied. You know, if we're like, hey, we love it, but you know, we're not really digging this extra hit here or there, you could actually go in. I've had a couple instances where it was like, okay, I don't like this marker right here, and I want to tighten this up a little bit. You hear the difference? What I did with that one is I actually took this rhythm right here in the kick. Or no, I'm sorry, in the snare. I took this rhythm in the snare and I pulled it out. How did I pull it out? Did you see it? There's a hit right here in the snare. I was like, you know what? I don't like that snare. What I'm going to do instead is I'm going to pull it so far to the right that watch what happens.
So the next hit.
Yeah, basically it disappears. It's out. You hear the difference here is here's what it was before. And here's what it is now. And you can do that with every other beat. If you're like, you know what, it's just too busy. Let me get rid of a few of these hits. Oh. Do you hear the difference?
Yeah.
I mean, monumental. Like, seriously. We were like, hey, you know, we don't like how sloppy that roll is. It's kind of, it sounds, let's take it out. And instead of deleting it, we just manipulated it to the point where not only is it inaudible, but we also didn't have to change anything drastic in it where it sounds like we cut it out. Because if we were to manually go in and try to cut that out, you would notice a clear difference. And it would sound choppy. All of a sudden it sounds...
So what now? That snare is just hidden.
Yep, it's just...
The next one.
Pretty much, it's just dissolved underneath the next marker. If we zoom in real tight, you could take it. You see how you still see it?
Yeah.
We could take it even further and just zoom in real tight so we can get it in all the way. And essentially, you'll see it visually, but it'll be inaudible. Pretty crazy, huh?
Yeah.
I mean, you could do that all day. Or, you know, you could do the opposite. You know what I mean? There's awesome. But you hear how much clarity it just gave it from what it was before, which is kind of nice. I mean, sometimes you're going to go in there and go, you know what, it was just too much. I had a producer tell me, because I was in New York and we were mixing this song that I was working on, and I was out there with the producer, and he's like, first thing he came in and he said is, who the hell let the drummer do all that stuff on that track? And he's like, we need to cut all this out. You know, we were getting a song ready for radio, and he's like, we got to cut all these extra rhythms out. And that's pretty much what we did. We had to go in there and, you know, and it's different because when you're in a band, the drummer wants to do this or do that, and you give him equal say. He's not looking at it through the perspective of, all right, if it's going to radio, it's got to be the dumbest drums you've ever heard, which is, in reality, it's so true. You never hear complex drums on the radio. You know, most of the time, it's like quarters, eighths, that's as far as you go. If there's a 16th, it's on the hat, and you never hear it anywhere else unless you're listening to a jazz station, you know, in reality. Because it's not radio-friendly for the normal, you know, yeah, the normal listener who just wants to sit back, relax, and, you know, unwind or whatever. They want to feel the groove. They don't want to be mentally challenged with the parts that are being played at them. You know what I mean? So, but when he said that, it was like, you know what? You were absolutely, I listened to it, and like, well, I guess in reality, I love it because I know what it does to the music, but at the same time, I'm a musician. And if people aren't going to get what's going on in here, I'd rather take it out. You know, of course I'd rather take it out, make more money, have more radio play, than leave it in there and be happier with it. You know, who wouldn't? To a certain degree. I mean, you're going to have to kind of, but you're going to have to look at parts like this sometimes and go, the right decision for this song is to make this change. You see what I'm saying? So it's good to know, it's great to know how to do this. Anyway, so there's the manual rap, right? Oh, the other thing was I said, somebody was out of the room when I said this. The other thing that this is good for is the final phrase. So if in the final hit, you're like, man, that drummer just didn't hold it out long enough. Right? You basically can just jump in there. Let's say they cut it off here. I'll just manipulate this a little bit here. Let's say some rookie engineer just caught this too short. Now, the importance of having this go long is because, in reality, once this goes to mastering, you're all of a sudden going to notice how short this is. So it's going to be important to know ahead of time, you need to make sure you have this planned out nice and long as it'll go. In a mastering engineer can go, all right, it's a 10-second release at the very end of the song. Obviously, I only need 2, and you can cut it and fade it. But he can't go, oh, they gave me a 1 second, and I need 2. He's not going to screw around with it, take all that time. So all you're going to do with this is just drop the marker, control, drop the opening marker, and then control, drop the ending marker, and then drop one more boundary to the left so nothing else gets moved on that other side. And then what I like to do to make it easy is you can see where the end of the fade is. You see the end of the fade? Control, add 1 to the end of the fade. Now I can pull this back as far as it'll go until it goes red. Once it goes red, it is below the point of sounding natural. So listen to it when it's red. Well, I actually didn't even do it. You hear how it goes? It shouldn't go. It should just go. Yeah, all I'm going to do is stretch it as far as I can go. Now, notice what changed down here. Actually, I will have to undo this. I'd started too far. Excuse me. What I would do with this is actually pull the strength of this out here. Now, like this, hit this marker. And once I do that, I can then take the other part of it beyond. Although, I don't know why it's hitting that. It shouldn't be. Let me try something real quick. Let's try pulling this boundary back. Actually, let me try something else. Oh, I think... Shoot, did I already... Oh, that's why. Huh? Here we go. I'll do it like this. I think there is a problem right here. Yeah, here it kind of raises. So even that, if I was like, all right, well, that's not working. I'd rather manually clip that and pull it back. So I'd rather actually manually cut that spot out and make my own fade. So that guy's gone. You know, and then once you do this, all you're going to have to do is go in. Once you make the appropriate changes, all you're going to do is you're going to go in and go back. Yeah, go back into the waveform. You're going to do your crossfade or your fade out like you were taught to, the long ones. For those that missed Monday, there is one rule of editing that we talked about, and it's short fades, fast fades at the beginnings, long fades at the ends. What that means is at the end, it should look low and long. It shouldn't look like this. This is a fast fade. The reason why it's a fast fade is because it waits till the very end to pull down. You see that? This is a long fade. Whoops, sorry. Long fade essentially gives us the ability to kind of go kind of gradually with it, and then we kind of have a long stretch towards the end. It's not this, where is it? Not the S curve. This one. It's not this. Right? It's not just that general fade down. It's a nice elongated fade. And it should actually span a long distance so that it sounds nice and natural. Still a bit of a little bit of a hiccup in there still. Anyway, so that's that. Now, I'm going to go ahead. We're going to take a lunch break, but before we do, I will say this. This is a huge DSP killer if I leave this live in Elastic Audio with the Elastic Audio plugins on. Because what it's doing is it's actually doing the warping manually as it crosses each marker that I created. What you want to do when you're done is you want to go to the plugin, you want to hit Disable Elastic Audio. So when you're done, sorry, this will be an extra step, so step 4. When you're done, step 4, you disable Elastic Audio. And you're going to do it by disabling the Elastic Audio plugins. I'll just add that at the end. Disable Elastic Audio plugin. Pretty simple, right? Step 5, it's going to ask you if you want to conform the audio to what you just warped. You will say, yes, please choose conform. What it's going to do is it's going to basically, like in quantization, where it reprints the version of the clip, it's going to reprint an audio version of the warp so that it's fixed to audio. So you can export it, and whoever else takes it on has exactly what you did with the warp. But once you do the conform, you can undo, but you can't necessarily go back and change your warp markers unless you hit undo. So if you're like, hey, I hate it, you can hit undo, go back and get to them. Here's the catch, though. When you hit conform, just like when you hit consolidate, when you hit conform, guess what it does? It puts a print of this in your audio file folder. So if you hit conform and you hit undo, it'll undo it, but it'll still exist in your audio files folder and in your clips list, which means if you did it 10 times, you would have just blew up a whole bunch of space on your hard drive that you didn't need to. So it's very important to know, don't do this until you're satisfied. So what I like to do is I won't conform until I listen to the whole thing as a big picture, because a lot of times you're real into it tight, nice and tight. Listen to it as a big picture. Sometimes I'll still do an export with it like it is and see if I like it. Now when I love it, I'll go ahead and put it to print with conform, right? Make sense? So, but here's the other thing is the thing that we were talking about. It's a DSP killer. So if we were to go to Window and look at our disk usage, our system usage, you'll see our system CPU chilling right now. As soon as I go into the marker area, you'll start to see it starts to very quickly, very rapidly accelerate. So you see that? You guys see that? There went all my warp markers. When you saw disk go up to like 20%, there went my warp markers. Sorry, I'll get closer to it so you can actually see the warp markers in the same screen as you see the disk usage. So, here we are, yeah. So before this, we're all fine and dandy, and all of a sudden you see a change. Particularly the one at the end here, because it's trying to catch up with the. Yeah. Now, so you notice how it didn't even. And what's really interesting with it is it goes through that section and it doesn't come back down to normal activity until a couple of phrases, or really a couple of measures beyond it. So it struggles. Here's the thing most people actually don't catch with the disk usage. Your CPU, when it seizes, it usually seizes from a single spike or a single instance of simultaneous spiking that comes from 0% or 20%. All of a sudden, it just hits at 90% and it's done in one particular instance. Unfortunately, it's not fluid enough. Like our computer systems were not at this time fluid enough to really be able to handle these kinds of spikes and somehow, like, I guess, dissipate them over a longer period of time. So it's not one giant 90% spike. It was, 5 different instances of 20% spikes. So it's kind of it kind of lags. But if you were to do this all day with a lot of these tracks, you would realize your CPU just went down the drain. So definitely when you're mixing, when you go to mix downs, you don't want anything in elastic audio at all when you're ready for mix down, which is why I always suggest, this is a good process to learn. When you're tracking, track. When you're editing, edit. When you're mixing, mix. But when you're mixing, try to avoid it. It still happens. Believe me, it still happens. I was working on a project this morning, and I was like, oh man, this hook has to be flown to the intro. The sound that I'm looking for, I still have to make an edit. Let me make an edit. And I'm in the mix down. But I don't want to do that necessarily. You don't want to be screwing around with the edits in the mix down. But vice versa, you don't want to screw around with mixes when you're doing elastic audio, because your CPU usage is being shared between all those plugins and appropriately mapping out the elastic audio editing. So just be aware of the fact that it's a CPU draw. It's a major CPU draw. So anyway, let's take a lunch break. You guys have questions? Thoughts? I mean, it's not that hard. Now, what's beautiful is it does a really good job. When we get into quantizing, I mean, most of the quantizing functions are so fast. All right, let's take a lunch break. We'll come back at 12. Yes.
I didn't know.
Oh.
I have a problem with it here. This keeps popping up on my screen.
Wait, where are you saved, by the way?
Is it this one or this one?
Thank you.
A. Okay. Well, have you saved it yet?
I haven't been able to because every time I try to save it, it does that.
Did it do this before too?
I closed it like twice before we keep coming up, so I was like, okay, I'm just gonna wait.
Well, okay, let's walk through this real quick. When you copy this to your drive, did you rename anything after you copied it there?
I just straight copied it to my hard drive,
And then you opened it.
and then I opened it up.
Sometimes, the only time, well, most of the time you only see that error if this has been moved from its location when it was open. Right? Let's go with something else. Disk allocation, audio 241.
And then when I tried to move it, what marker would it let me?
Oh, really?
I'll see now. Well, it does that one, but it didn't do another one.
Well, it might be because you're in grid.
Oh, is that why?
Yeah. Well, and the other thing is though, if like down here at the bottom, if you were to try to slide this through this maze, you can't pull it beyond that because it's colliding with the one down below. Sometimes you have to just be on like when you're doing multiple tracks, you have to be looking for possible so like these are the things you have to cover for when you're doing these, but yeah, that sucks. Okay, so I think what have you done so far? You haven't done a ton, right?
No, because
Well,
I've only opened it like earlier.
but you already closed it and opened it again?
Not fully turn on. I haven't done that.
Maybe you should just do a reboot. A complete reboot, just one break.
Same.
Yeah. Well, I would try that.
Okay.
Close it, do a reboot, immediately see if you can save it once you get it back up. You don't have to do it now, but at least when we come back from lunch, I
I'd immediately open and see if it works. If it doesn't, then you may need to actually copy and move the session somewhere else.